And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
In the not-too-distant future, robots have become indistinguishable from humans. There's nothing to stop them from living their lives peacefully. Nothing it is but the Bureau of Identity Compliance. This game here, which is definitely based on Blade Runner and the interrogation scene therein, is a two-player game, although with scenarios you could play with more than two players, in which one person is an interrogator and the other person is either a human or a robot, and the interrogator needs to figure that out. It is at max 7 minutes of a game, so it's fairly short. It's a pretty big box because there's a lot of components herein. Let's take a look. This game comes with 11 interrogation models. Each of these models has a deck of cards that comes with it. So you pick one. So maybe you would pick self-image here. So once you pick it, there are 7 investigator prompts in it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then there are 12 robot inducers. When you look at these, there's going to be 4 humans, 3 violent robots, and 6 humans, 3 violent robots, and 3 patient robots. So these are going to be shuffled, and one of these is going to be given to one of the players, and that's going to essentially tell them whether you are a human, a violent robot, or a patient robot. If you have a patient robot, you have something that you need to specifically do. So when you describe yourself, you may only mention physical traits, but you may mention emotional, mental traits of other people. Here you can't even talk about individual people. If you're a violent robot, you have some tasks that you need to do. And if you're a human, you're just a human. There's a little bit of a maze here, and we'll talk about that in a second. All right, now we get weird. There's some penalty cards. The interrogator is going to pick 3, give them to the suspect. The suspect's going to pick one and put it face down here. Yay, it's the penalty card, okay? And now they have to calibrate themselves by doing the penalty 3 times, where they will be checked off. The investigator is going to make sure that they know how to do it. Say 2 consecutive rhyming words. Kazoo, do. Toe, no. Happy, sappy. Whatever. The rule book gives you this whole reasoning why you're doing this. Like, it's the first time to establish authority. Okay, is this a real handbook for life, or is this for the game? Anyhow, then the game forces each character to look at their card, and it's gonna the investigator asks you to give you the calibration guide, which in this case you can see is BEFCAD. You need to say it in that order. The human has the same thing, but they're going to be following a maze. So if they start here, it's like BEFCAD, and they will have to look at their sheet. The robot can pretend to be looking at a maze and doing that, but they know exactly what the calibration guide is. So that's the second thing that you have to do. And once again, you can mark it off on the sheet here as we do that. Now, it's time to go into the main aspect of what's going on. At this point, depending on if you got it right or wrong, you'll be drawing some of these cards here. The calibration, and this is your thing. Hey, I'm sponsored by an energy drink brand. I'm a cannibal, motivational speaker. Whatever it is, a butler to the stars, world's second richest person. And you have to, the person who is the robot or human is going to be giving a background, explaining to the interrogator. But then the interrogation starts. It's 5 minutes long. And in this time, the investigator is going to be taking the other cards, having a primary and secondary thing here, and you are asking these questions to the robot. You know, describe a quality they lack. Describe one or more of their positive qualities. How might that be different in 5 years? These are like follow-up questions. Honestly, I'm still not 100% sure you need these. But this is kind of to give you if you can't think of what else to talk about. While the other player is answering these questions. Now, they're trying to persuade the investigator that they are human. even if they're not. If you are human, you just answer the questions, make up whatever, who cares? If you are a violent robot, you are trying to do something a certain number of times before the investigator catches you doing whatever this weird thing is. Like comparing myself to another version of myself, compare myself to somebody else. The patient person is trying to not break their rule here. If they do break their rule, they have to do the penalty. Which, of course, if they do the penalty and the investigator catches them doing the penalty, the investigator knows they broke the rule. Now, if the violent robot does 2 of the 3 things it says here, perform the penalty twice, or change your answer to a question, you do 2 of those 3, you have to wait 10 seconds, and then you hit the table like this, and it means you killed the investigator, and you win. All right? If the timer runs out, the 5-minute timer, then the investigator can ask one final question, and then they are going to stamp your paper with human or saying you're a robot. Now, the problem here is if you wait too long as the investigator, the violent robot can kill you. So you might want to stamp it early. You can stamp it at any time you want. But after 5 minutes, you have to decide whether that person is human or whether they're a robot. And at that point, if it's a human, then you both win. Otherwise, the robot beats the investigator. As you can see, there's a lot of pieces to this game. There's this training guide. I have to say, this is an incredibly confusing rulebook. They are assuming you already know what this game is. They're assuming there's so much assumption in this game. Also, it's ridiculously overproduced. I mean, this is a heavy game, and there's all these cards in the game, but they could have made these a lot smaller. Like this, you're a human, here's a maze. This could have been in half. I don't know, it feels like it's trying to set some sort of mood, and I get that. The stamps are kind of funny, and you're actually supposed to stamp someone's wrist if they make a mistake. But it's nice, it has this box here, but it feels like they didn't put a lot of effort into the penalties. They definitely didn't put a lot of effort into the occupations, I feel. And even these almost feel a little half-baked. So it feels like they put more effort into how it looked and felt than the actual content for the game. I should mention that there's a simpler set of rules in here than the ones I showed you, but I don't think these give enough information on how to play the game, so you need the other ones anyway. There's also a set of advanced rules and scenarios, and in here, if you play with some of these scenarios, you could play with more players. They got 2 Roombas and a broom, which is from the guy designed 2 rooms and a boom. And there's also one where there's some candidates running for president or some office, and one person's a moderator trying to figure out which one's the robot. But let's talk about the base game here. So I have a lot of problems with this game. I don't like it. But I like the concept. The concept's fascinating. Hey, I'm sitting there trying to figure out if you're a robot and you're trying to act human and stuff. But there's a humongous flaw in the game, and that's if the person is a human and you're interrogating them. So when I look here at the victory conditions here in the game, which are here, if the investigator is and the person is a human and they stamp human, both players win. It's not hard to pretend you're a human. So when you do this, and you can actually see us doing this live on our channel, we did it on one of our No Strings Attached videos, you then for the next 5 minutes are talking, wait till the time runs out, and they stamp human, and yay, you both win. Now, is there the underlying tension there for the investigator that it might be a robot? Sure. But if you are the suspect, you're a human. So whatever. You win. Now, you know, if you get them, if they say robot, you lose. So you're not trying to be tricky or deceitful. 50% of the time, the game is boring. Now, when the player's a robot, that's much more interesting. And I like that concept, but the problem is unless you play the 50% of the time boring games, the 50% of the time stress games don't work. Now, in a multiplayer thing, this is more interesting because one person is the robot and they're trying to pass themselves off amongst humans. So that's more interesting. But as a 2-player thing, it doesn't work simply because half the games are straight up white bread boring. Another problem I have with this game is it takes itself too seriously. Like, I think it's trying to be funny, but maybe not. I mean, even in these basic rules here, it says the investigator should use notes, the notes portion of their form. I mean, it gives you this form here with this whole form here that you fill out just to say whether they're a robot or not. This is kind of ridiculous. But then it says you should compose an apology to the suspect's family. Continue on to the back of the form if their mistake was particularly egregious. And human suspects shake hands normally. Robot suspects always shake hands in some obviously weird way. And it's like, are you kidding me? This is just such a... It just feels like they're trying too hard. They're trying too hard to turn this into some sort of role-playing game. And it's not. This is the kind of game that I think sounds real cool in theory. Like, oh, wow, that does seem interesting. And yeah, it makes for some good movie scenes. But it doesn't really mean anything there. When for one player in a particular game, there's zero tension, that's problematic. When they're a robot, there's more tension. But then the other person knows they're a robot. I find it to be a problematic game in that regard. And then you have all these cards with a few things written on them. The conversations are weird and cerebral sometimes because the cards point you in that direction. And you say, but that's just like the movie. Yeah, but that's more interesting to watch on an intellectual basis than it is to play. This feels like much to do about nothing. But something I wanted it to be. When I first read that, I was like, this sounds really good. But in practice, I don't have time for a game that is not fun half the time. And there's a lot of other social deduction games out there. Yes, there's very few social deduction games for 2 players. So that is a much smaller window. But there's a lot of great games for 2 players, even if they're not social deduction, and I'd rather play one of those. So I'm not really recommending Inhuman Conditions here, unless you want to get it for some sort of, play acting or, preparation for, something else you're doing or as a display piece. I mean, it's maybe an interesting game to watch, but I can't really recommend it for more than that. That's Inhuman Conditions. I'm Tom Vasel. You've been watching the Dice Tower. Dice Tower Judgment, a good idea, but not a good game.